we are recording. So I would like to introduce our guest speaker who is going to be talking about resolving rape culture, which I believe is essential for healing the relationship between Black women and Black men. Derrick Shackleford, affectionately known as Brother Shack, is the director of the Men and Boys programming at True Love Movement. He is a healer, educator, author, life coach, and radio host based in New Orleans, but organizes and serves communities nationwide. His work emphasizes the socio-cultural development of Black men and boys in America. His multi-generational healing work produces good Black men and boys able to function within their respective supportive communal roles, ensuring safety, security, and general well-being within their own evolving communities. He's worked with schools, community organizations, religious institutions, and businesses, as well as in media and entertainment, spreading the message of self-love and cultivating communal independence. He is also the author of Resolving Rape Culture, which is the focus of tonight's discussion. So without further ado, I would like to bring on Brother Shack.
All right. Thank you, very sister. Greetings, family. I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to do this. I've been able to participate in several previous calls on Thursdays, and for people who are joining this call who are not normally a part of this, I would encourage you to come back next Thursday and really take a look at the Black Awakening movement. There's a lot of things we can learn collectively with people that we seemingly don't know. And I'm glad that they're out there. And I'm also honored to have an opportunity to participate in this call as well. And thank you, Sister Segmet, for that introduction. The book is called Resolving Rape Culture. And as you said, opening up, that this is a discussion. And I think that it should be. Zoom doesn't really allow us to do, I don't think we can do effective lectures or book readings and that kind of thing because, people's attention span wanes when they're not able to engage. So in the spirit of the discussion, I would like to say we will have a discussion as opposed to a formal book reading, if that's all right with everybody. Sister, is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. We'll do some referencing of the book, but the time won't really permit us to dig very, very deep in it. And so I would like to just kind of start off with a little bit of history, if that's all right, about at least how I got here. And so I am, as our sister said, the director of Men and Boys programming for True Love Movement. And True Love Movement is a New Orleans-based organization that emphasizes the healing, social-emotional psychotherapy, the healing of Black people in America who are responding to racism, white supremacy. It was founded and started by Sister Ayana Molina, affectionately known as Mama Fire, who was gifted this mission in, I want to say 2002. So we've been around for a long time. And what her intentions was being able to offer our people a model, a psychological model for healing that wasn't the white psychological model, which, focuses on the I. She recognized that our people were dehumanized and disenfranchised, and we didn't have an I to focus on. And that's why most of the time, psychotherapy isn't so effective with Black people, particularly when we're outside of our community. And so she saw a need and was called to do this work, and had been doing it for about 6 or 7 years before her and I reconnected, and really around her book, Runaway Girl, which talks about her experience as sexual abuse survivor from very early ages of 5 or 6 years old, and all of the sexual trauma that ensued as a result of those encounters. And we'd gone back, we'd known each other since, children. And I just wasn't aware that she had that experience. And so we reconnected around that book, and she offered True Love Movement, and it was expanding to, initially it was about Black women and girls. And, she recognized early that if these sisters are becoming well and better, there needs to be a masculine component for that, for brothers. And so she asked me if I would be that person. And so that's how I became director of Men and Boys Programming for True Love. And so we offer the licensed professional counseling, life coaching, peer support, many other kinds of very specialized programs that are specifically formulated for Black people, because we understand Black people, and it makes sense for us to work in our community. Both of us come from a community organizing background. And so in the course of doing that work, we became a couple. And we did the couple, that we got married, and it was during that time that this particular work that we're going to talk about tonight, Resolving Rape Culture, was born. And it happened because, as a brother who is a lover of Black people, and having allegiance to Black people, even, we would, in the course of our relationship, we're talking about healing the relationships between Black women and Black men. She would say to me, King, that's patriarchy. And I would say, oh no, you got that all wrong. And she would, say a little more, and I'd be like, nah, you got that all wrong. Because if it was patriarchy, I would know it. I'd tell you. So this is just where I was with it. And what that did was the grappling with that and the wrestling with that. And she said it so much, and then eventually she stopped saying it because I just really wasn't listening. Even though I had very good intentions and I didn't mean any kind of harm, I wanted the good intentions I had to be good enough to, sidestep this uncomfortable kind of a topic. And so as that progressed, I really got to looking at myself and the ways that I was in the world. And so in the course of doing that, and also simultaneously working with almost exclusively Black men and boys of all ages, I realized there were some common themes, and there was a common paradigm. And part of the reason why I didn't want to look at myself is because I was a little bit ashamed of some of the ideology I had, because I knew it wasn't right, but it's what I had, and it seemed like the place to start from. So that, we had a very lengthy relationship, nearly 10 years, almost 9 years, right? Almost 10 years. And before we decided that we had done the relationship thing, but, continued to do this work together. And she's actually the sister whose image is on the cover of the book. Mm-hmm. So if you have the book and you see that image that's holding up the Black man here with the atlas, that's her image. And I wanted to say that because this is how we got really here, is because of a Black woman. And so I want to make certain that we're able to center Black women, and then understand that in centering Black women, we are not minimizing or opposing Black men. And that's been a very challenging thing for our people, in so much as the way we've been socialized, because we've all been dehumanized as a result of racism and supposed white supremacy in the dominating culture. And I just think it's important that we know going in that we're going to center Black women. And if there's anyone who has any kind of a feeling about that, that's good. I would ask you to think about where you feel it in your body, only because there's something to look at when we do center Black women. It brings up all kinds of things, many things that we're not particularly proud of, the kinds of things that we don't talk about normally. And so what I'd hope we can do in a short amount of time is talk about, in the discussion, healing the relationship between Black women and Black men. If I could just ask anyone on the call to talk about, you know, the period of time in America when the relationship between Black women and Black men was healthy. Anyone on the call that can identify that period of time when the relationship between Black women and Black men was in fact a healthy relationship?
Right. I would respond to that. Prior to the enslavement of Africans, when we were in our own homeland and interacting from the naturalistic view that we associate with each other.
Right. Baba Khalil is absolutely right. Presumptively in our homeland. But I want to restate the question because I want us to think more recent. The question was what period of time in America, if someone can identify a period of time in America when we were healthy, the relationship between Black women and Black men was a healthy one.
I'm saying, right. I mean, I was born in the 70s. Okay, so what I remember was like 1970 to 1980. They were good times for Black men and Black women.
Okay, there were good times. Would you categorize it as healthy in terms of the relationship between Black women and Black men?
One thing I could say about, the old school music, all Marvin Gaye and all the Temptations and the Blue Tops and all, the Five Tops or, the other ones, they always been singing about love. I never heard them singing that, what they sang about today is not love. They singing about today. But back when Marvin Gaye was singing, that was about love. Marvin Gaye, the Temptations, they were singing about pure love. There wasn't no type of hatred in that at all.
Okay, thank you, brother. And I think that's a great place to start the conversation. As our brother is saying, the music of the 70s, and we had been here in America before the 70s, but the brother said in the 70s, things were good between us, and I guess that is a little debatable. But if we started with the music and what the Four Tops and folks were singing, they were singing about particularly the guy groups. They was talking about how you are my woman or you're my girl, right? You remember that song? It was a song that said, "Be my girl." You remember that? Mm-hmm. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember.
Yeah, and so it sounds very affectionate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it sounds like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And so in the book, Resolving Rape Culture, rape here is an acronym. And the acronym is religion, athletics, politics, and entertainment. Again, in the book, Resolving Rape Culture, the acronym for rape is religion, athletics, politics, and entertainment. And so we won't look at those as things, but rather as lenses. We'll look at those as lenses and their relationship to our view of Black women and how that shapes their normative experiences. And so when you have a song that's all about love, we say, saying, be my girl, what it's really about is about possession. You be my girl. Now, if you're my girl, I'm your man, because many of the songs say that you be my girl and I'll be your man. But it's interesting that you're my girl, you're a girl and I'm a man. I'm not your boy. Oh no, we're not gonna do that. But you be my girl and I'll be your man. We're looking at something about possession and hoping that the sister can belong to someone. And that is in the lens of entertainment. You know, entertainment just means when something enters your mind and it holds your attention. So and I'm using this for an example is because most of our experiences, and I really haven't found any of our normative experiences as Black folks in America that fall outside of the lens or the influence of religion, athletics, politics, or entertainment. These things are very much so integral in the way that we relate to one another because we are relational people. We are a community. We are connected. And the tragedy of slavery severed our natural connection. So we've been trying to reclaim those connections through possession. And that is the way that we do normatively in relationships, in the possession. So we're looking for someone to belong to us in a place where we can belong. In the course of doing that, we're entering into these relationships, not healthy and whole human beings, but folk who are looking for something. We even ask each other, well, what are you bringing to the table? Because we're looking at each other not in a very humane way, but in a very transactional way. Now, there's a history about why we would do that. When you look at the relationship between Black women and Black men, and even though our brother was saying in the 70s things were good, there's probably sisters on the call that were catching all kind of hell in the 70s, even while that music was playing in the background.
Yeah.
Who may disagree. Now, it's not that they have so much of a difference of opinion, but they have an experience. And because we have been socially conditioned to invisibilize Black women, if we say things were good, because we feel like it was good, well, then that's just what it was. And we don't even ask or consider perhaps there was another perspective. And so that isn't a criticism on us. We learn to invisibilize women who today are politically designated as Black. We've learned to invisibilize them, and this has the momentum of a 400-year history. And so if we look at, and what I'll do for the sake of time and also for discussion, I will list for you the chapters in the Resolving Rape Culture book. Mama, did you have something?
Yes, I've been raising my hand over here.
I didn't see it because I didn't see it. Look, my hands are here. I don't want no trouble.
I wanted to respond to the question.
Okay, please.
About the relationship between us, Black men, Black women, since our time here. There never has been a time when our relationships have been whole or been
Correct.
Healthy, because they have always been within the parameters and within the under the auspices of racism, white supremacy. They've had to exist within this container of restriction and this container of dysfunction and pathology. So there never has been a time here in this country that we have been in healthy relationships because we've not been healthy. We have not been whole. We have not been made human again. And the degradation, the dehumanization and the denigration that was forced upon us has never, ever, ever not been upon us. We have just continued to struggle and function within the dysfunction and the pathology that's always around us.
That's right.
And I just wanted to add that we've never been healthy, even though, as the brother was saying, the music sang of all these ideals. It was the singing amidst the dysfunction and the pathology of what we thought we were wanting, but not what we had.
That's right. Thank you for that, Mama. And because we have never been healthy, we don't have a model to go back to. So I'm lifting that up because this is why this is an ongoing conversation, because we're finding our way in the midst of oppression. And oppression, this kind of oppression that we've suffered, it doesn't really offer us a clear view of our oppressor, but rather we can only see us. So when we think about what's the problem, well, the problem is you, because I can see you. And so then we get to another part of the book, the athletics chapter. So the athletics chapter is a very lengthy chapter. It's kind of an arc in the book, because what it does is it's got about 8 distinct different parts. Originally, that chapter was 57 pages long. And the reason it was so long and there was so much that just really had to get cut out of it is because it's very difficult for particularly Black men in general to accept that there could ever be anything unhealthy or undesirable about sports, about athletics. It has been the source of pride for our people in America for a very long time, like well over a century. But for that same century, what it really was, it has been marketed to Black men as a problem-solving technology. Conceptually, athletics has been marketed to Black men as a problem-solving technology. So what you have is the same coordinated, controlled violence that you had on the plantation in the course of the sports dynamic. It's not random violence. It's very coordinated and it's controlled. And this is taught as a means of how you get something done. You know, lately folks have been saying Black people are at war. And we've been at war and we've been prisoners of war for 400 years. Yes. And so when you look at what war is, the idea about war is it's not just this random violent kind of a thing. It's got very specific aims and strategies that go along with it. What I'll do very quickly from the athletics chapter is I'm going to read just a paragraph here, maybe 3/4 of the way through it. It says, as I've asked brothers young and old to confirm for me that men and women are in fact the opposite sexes for many years, almost 100% of the time respondents answer in the affirmative. Next, I ask them, how do they know that to be the truth? Then I'll restate their answers to clarify that their position is that women generally are the opposition of men, the opposing force, an opponent. By now, the more thoughtful brothers are as adamant as their initial yes, though a great majority of those asks are still maintaining an emphatic no. I even become more straightforward in my questioning because I'm asking whether your opponent is your competition. And I need them to tell me what it is you are supposed to do to your competition. I ask about the proverbial killer instinct and what is required to win. I question if it is ever wise to trust your competition. By now, I'm asking them directly where their policy for Black women has come from, and regardless of age, there's seldom more than a shoulder shrug of a response. In my estimation, these respondents are generally not sinister Black men or boys, but rather typical brothers born and raised in America. And so generally there's this understanding that men and women are opposite sexes. I mean, I heard it all the time growing up, the whole men are from Mars and women are from Venus and all these kinds of things. And on the surface, it sounds very, very harmless and, silly or whatever, but it's really deep, particularly for Black men, because the number one is where we learn about relationships. As Mama Makeda pointed out, we've learned this from looking up at the slave master and his family on the plantation. Our family units, as they were before we were enslaved and before we were conquered here, we don't have those experiences anymore. I mean, we have them in our DNA, but we don't have them to draw from. In America, all we know is what we saw in the big house. And so we essentially model the way that we relate to one another behind what we thought we saw white folks doing. That's what we did. That's what we learned how to do this. So of course it's a dysfunctional model because they were dehumanizing us in that process. So it's nothing strange about us dehumanizing or furthering that dehumanizing, because this is what we learned and how we were taught. In America, these people who continue to oppress us today have been our parents. This is where we get whatever we got from. That's not anything that any of us, I'm sure, is proud of, but this is also why we struggle to actually heal, because we can see the hurt that the other has caused, but we don't have any analysis on what has been their experience that brought them to that and why this thing is normative. And so when, as brothers emphatically say, that men and women are opposite sexes, then we've already got a playbook for what you do with your opponent, your opposition. Because America offers Black people, and all people, but particularly Black men, of what I call a very limited, partial, and provisional membership into the white man's patriarchal fraternity. It is a limited, partial, and provisional membership, so long as we hold the arrangement in place. And so what that looks like in relationship to Black women is, Black women are our opposites. So she is our opposition, she is our opponent. In the ideology and concept of sports and athletics, sport would mean on the surface, I think it was the word D-sport, was just about fun, like a fun activity. But sports are very, again, the most prominent sports are controlled, coordinated, very specifically directed violence. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. And so it's the same ideology that was used on the plantation that quelled the uprisings, but it's done in a framework of fun, and then you become a spectator. And then you begin to idolize the people who are playing the sport, because what they're doing is winning. And the one thing that you learn in America early is that America is really about winning. But in order to win something, you have to have an opponent. You have to have an opposition, and you must have a contest. And so America presents a paradigm, a normative paradigm of win, lose. So either you're a winner or you're a loser. Those are the only options, which means everything essentially is very, very competitive. And this whole idea about you got to have a competitive spirit and a good competitive energy about you is part of the socialization and conditioning. But it's particularly attractive to Black men because Black men were on that plantation for all that time being violated in every conceivable kind of way and were never men. But in 1865, Black men got to be men, or Black males rather got to be men, at least in law and on paper. And so the whole idea about being a man and manhood and all of that, it was suppressed in us. for 246 years. So the idea that you can physically get in the ring with someone and beat on them the way that your ancestors were beat on, that you can get in be part of a team who can go up against another team and potentially use your physical body to win, as opposed to your physical body being used as the tool to make money for the person who owns you, which is sports is still essentially that. It's still that, but at least now you get compensated for it. So we have to understand too, on a very deep and collective psychological level, the suppression of masculinity or being physical and that kind of thing. You know, this is perfect for Black people. This is a perfect thing. And so we learn about that very, very young, and we become very competitive because we think we're supposed to do that. And so in the win-lose paradigm, if somebody disagrees with you, then you can't take what now they talk about taking an L. You can't take an L. You ain't no man. You have to find a way to get them to submit, because that's what the goal is. And so how do you get them to submit? Well, you do it physically, meaning I can ask you to do something and you can say no. But if I reserve the right to beat that ass, you may do what I'm asking you to do, not because you want to do it, but because you don't want to get beat. So that becomes part of the training. Like we're operating out of fear. Again, we're already a fearful people because we've been dehumanized in a way that we don't have a sense of personhood. So we're perpetually insecure. That's part of the Black experience. That's what oppression does. It makes us perpetually insecure. We're not safe anywhere. And we don't have the feeling of safety anywhere. If we do, it's at a very limited, maybe at home, perhaps in the car alone, maybe by some family, but not by most, because who knows? So we don't feel safe most of the time. That's just not our experience. None of us is Black people. But when you look at the experience of Black women have been violated by everybody for the history of America. And she's not violated anyone. There's no one there for the Black woman to oppress. There's never really been anyone there for her to oppress, not as a collective. So part of that training tells us that this is the Black woman's experience. She is supposed to submit to us. She's supposed to submit. Now we get that from the Bible. So that's the religion part of it. And so we're looking at the introduction and the imposition of Christianity on the plantation as a tool to quell uprisings. That was imposed. And so during that time, and what the religion chapter essentially takes us through is, there's a very lengthy collection for my Bible scholars who are on here on the call. You already know. There's, several pages of passages in the Bible that are directed to do two things. Directed at how you engage with slaves and then how you engage with women. These are policies. This is before any constitution. And this was part of the teachings in the Bible about being a good slave and, honoring your master in their face, and also, wherever else there, even places they work. And it also tells you about what's supposed to happen with women. Now, on the surface, that sounds like, well, that's just Black people had that experience. The collective of enslaved Africans, had that experience. That was true. However, the advent of the Negro preacher was the first time in the history of America that I was able to locate that there was a status, an upward mobility offered to an enslaved African, not by individual, but by gender. The enslaved Negro could become a Negro preacher and be given a flock and lord over his flock and, kind of have his own, be his white man, but in that particular place. But he could only do that so long as he taught what was in the Bible. And we know that is the history of today's Black church. That's the legacy of it. That's how it came to be. But what often gets missed in that is that there was no comparable status offered to the enslaved African woman. There was nothing offered to her that was comparable. And what the key is here is that, so that means that not every enslaved African male was going to become a preacher, but only African males could be. So again, the policy was there are policies for slaves and there are policies for women. And one of the things that as our people were taught Christianity was about us being good and pleasing in his sight, and that our obedience to the imposition of slavery was going to get us into heaven. So if you're a black woman, what you were offered is you have to take this, and if you do this, you're good and you're going to go to heaven. And if you're a black man, you can maintain that arrangement and say, well, look, this is not what I want, this is what God wants. And so that's a pretty raw deal for a sister to get, but that's what happened. But since it was her, it wasn't so much of a thing. So I will do a paragraph from the, or two rather, from the religion chapter. It says, and thus the advent of the Negro preacher was a tool. The historical significance of this new designation deserves its own analysis. This new creation was in fact a position that elevated the status of the selected Negro male on the plantation. The preacher was anointed and trusted by God himself, the master, to preside over and care for his own flock. Though the slave master himself was regarded as the good earthly shepherd over the plantation and all the slaves, the preacher had been subcontracted to act on behalf of the master. Of course, not all Negro males would be elevated to this status. As a matter of historical fact, no such status or comparable position of authority was ever offered to a Negro female. This, too, is significant in that it is not merely at the pleasure of the slave master that the Negro male was awarded this status, but rather a matter of biblical law. Though slaves were not regarded as actual full human beings, slave owners were versed crudely enough in gender and biology to the extent that a great deal of experimentation by way of forcible rape and other invasive consensual surgical procedures had been standard for centuries prior. They had determined some anatomical similarities between the slave and the master. Therefore, the Negro male was closest to that of the actual free man, and thereby the closest to himself, and the only logical option to do such life-saving work. Now, if you all are not familiar with some of the passages that deal specifically and exclusively with the female, and I'm saying the female because I know sometimes when we're talking to our people, we say, and the female. Anybody ever heard that? She's a female. And I was talking to this female. Y'all ever heard that? Anybody? Or anybody say that or use that?
Yes, I've heard it.
Yeah, and so, again, it seems like it's factually correct. It's no big deal. And we don't say the same thing about the male. We are very clear that it's a female and then it's a man or a brother or whatever, but something about a female. And in saying that, in categorizing who we're referring to as a woman who's politically designated as black, as a female, just in saying that, linguistically, we remove the humanity from that. And so if she's a female, then that's not exactly a full human person. She don't really get what humans get because she's a female. You know how females are, and that's kind of, again, linguistically. But before it becomes linguistic, something has occurred in our understanding about the hollowness of her humanity. We've learned that. We've learned that over time, and we've learned to invisibilize that. And part of the way we learned it is we were instructed in the Bible. I mean, do you realize that there are many, many things that apply to females in the Bible? And when a Negro preacher is preaching this word, he's not talking to white females or slave masters' wife. This is not about them. He's talking to enslaved African females. And so one such passage is in Leviticus, 21st chapter, the 9th verse, and it says, "And the daughter of any priest, if she profane herself by playing the whore, she profaneth her father. She shall be burnt with fire." That's the verse, and that's pretty clear. There's not a lot of confusion. And the daughter of any priest. So this is a policy of any priest, and we know priests are, I mean, I guess depending on what branch of Christianity, Catholic. Well, we may not get into that, but you know, the idea of a priest is that's an elevated status, very similar to in the Christian confines, like that's elevated status. So we're talking about a man of God. But if she profaneth herself by playing the whore, she profaneth her father. Now, so let's understand, she profaneth herself because she's playing the whore. Now, her doing that also profanes her father, because what the book uncovers throughout is how there's those women who are today politically designated as black really only exist inside the social confines of our American normative experience in relationship to some man. Like you are a sister of someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's daughter. She's married. When in the ceremony of her being married, she's given away the husband, her father gives her away to her husband. It's a transaction. This is not really about her. This is about her relationship to someone else. This is not about her singular personhood. So when a sister, for example, in this particular example, she's supposed to be burned. Like if she's a whore, she's supposed to be burned if she plays a whore. So now the sister has to behave a certain way because she doesn't want to shame her father because of his position. So it's still really not about her and what she wants. It's really more about how her behavior is a reflection on her father, because her father ownership rights chapter really kind of lays that whole idea out about who a black woman belongs to, because really it's always a question of her belonging. And so right here it says, after legal slavery, how was ownership and controlling rights restored to the formerly enslaved? Who became owners of so-called Negro women and girls? Consider how long do you personally have to do something before it becomes normal? After 250 years, around 10 generations of a common understanding about social status and placement, the minds of all people were to suddenly make a quantum shift because those who essentially owned and controlled the laws changed the verbiage? Let's test it this way. Ask yourself which phrase rings the loudest in your memory. You're a free man. Hey, you're a free man. Or you're a free woman. Hey, you're a free woman. My own recollection is consistent with other respondents generally. The understanding of the free man narrative is the most prominent for me, and perhaps because I'm able to ascribe directly to it. Historically, the verbiage makes anyone not a man socially invisible. Using this example, in my own mind at least, my thoughts of freedom are in no logical way connected to those formerly enslaved African women and girls. To clarify, there is no acknowledgement of their positioning one way or another. It can also be concluded that no opinion could be formed on the basis of rightness for this or otherwise. So upon the discovery of America, the historical European opportunist sought first what he could extract from her. The papal bull said so and made future provisions for recognizing subsequent land set upon these conquistadors' feet to be proclaimed as Spain's property. In the historical example, we find the land vibrant with enormous potential, much like a little girl in her innocence. She doesn't necessarily describe herself as vulnerable, but those eyeing her growth and development nearing or at its full potential means her body is ready to produce children. And see, that's from the ownership rights chapter, meaning, again, sisters are looked at, or black women are looked at, and girls are looked at in relationship to the black men who essentially possess them. The music, as our brother was saying earlier, supports the narrative that you're mine, you belong to me, and you're supposed to belong to me. You're even supposed to want to belong to me, and that is normal. That is really just the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with that. But no one has ever asked the black woman, and they don't have to ask the black woman, because what is she going to do with that? You know, when I had a book reading and book signing, when this book came out on Black Love Day, as we're talking about healing the relationships between black women and girls, I asked the room, I asked them, what was the penalty for violating a black woman? And I'll ask you the same thing. Can someone on the call tell us what the penalty is for violating a black woman today? What's the penalty?
Nothing.
There's, there hardly ever is. I came across a statistic. I have to go back and look at it, but I'm not sure what the statistics are when it's the same race. But for rape of when a white man rapes a black woman, is basically a 0% conviction rate.
That's right.
So yeah, so I know in terms of that, there are no consequences, and I'm sure that reflects within assault from other races as well.
Right. And so,
Well,
go ahead.
Can I just add to what Segment just said, that because of the inferiorized, dehumanized, and denigrated status that was relegated to the black woman, that it was literally impossible, according to the legal status and the law, it was impossible to rape a black woman. It was impossible to molest her because her status held that she wasn't human anyway. Therefore, you could not be violating any human laws because she herself was not human, according to the fraudulent laws, statutes, and doctrines of Europeanology for that time frame.
That is absolutely correct. She was not human. Therefore, she could not.
For my ego on an issue. For issue. Cool.
But did somebody have something else they wanted to add to that?
yeah, I did. Well, I mean, like, I know what you were saying about the woman. I don't know, for some strange reason, it makes me want to say that, because when I be thinking about when black women be hurt or raped or something bad happens to them, you know, I think about, you know, black people as a whole. I really think the worst thing that a black person could do to another black person is to kill, like, for black people to kill each other. That's the worst thing you could do as a black person. Why, you know, that's a sin. That's the matter. That's a sin.
Well, brother, listen, I appreciate that, and I think you're right. That is a horrible thing. But what we're asking, the question is, what is the penalty for violating a black woman?
Hello, stay on topic, nigga.
What is it? What's the penalty for violating a black woman? Do we know? Brother, do you know?
I don't, yeah, help me out.
Okay, well, so see, this is what I'm saying. it's difficult to center on the experiences of Black women because we don't have an emotional muscle memory to do that because they've been chronically invisibilized through our socialization. But again, unbeknownst to us. So even when we're asking a very direct and specific question about her, we still can't see her. We see everybody around her. We see the whole of Black people, but we struggle to really see her. Now, what I have found, perhaps the reason we struggle to see her is because we have a little bit of a guilty conscience. Because I think it's safe to say that we know the reason people are very quiet about what the penalty is for violating a Black woman is because they know that there ain't no penalty. See, we know that there's not a penalty, but this is just not an intellectual knowing. The part that gives us a guilty conscience is that not only do we know it, but we all right with it. See, because it's her. It ain't happening. It's just happening to her. So to what Mama Makeda was talking about, and also in two chapters, in the ownership rights chapter as well as in the politics chapter, we look at there are very specific laws that apply to Black women that didn't apply to anyone else. One such law, and one of the earliest ones, was the Act 12 of 1662. And so what was happening on the plantation is that the lighter skinned enslaved African children were being killed, and their bodies were strewn all over the plantation. And does anybody know who was killing them? Who was killing these children who were very light-skinned, obviously the slave master's children? Who was killing them?
White women, I guess.
White women. Now, why would white women want to kill these children?
Because it reminded the white women of the infidelity of their husbands.
Okay.
They didn't
reminded
want
the
to
white
have
women.
that. They didn't want to have that lineage around.
Right. Now, that usually makes logical sense, and that's what most people say. But I would submit that these white women, they understood the character of these men before they married them. That wasn't really what their issue was. Because the colony was using, again, we're just talking 1662 here, not long after 1619. Because they were still using English common law, the children, it was patrilineal. So when the slave master died, these bastard children had a legal right to a piece of his inheritance. And of course, it's undeniable that they were his children because we were still very African in 1662. And so the slave masters took issue with their wives killing these children because they were messing up the money. See, these children, the Black woman, her womb was the golden goose. She was the gift that kept on giving. This is why she was bought, to produce more slaves. And so slaves cost money. These women are killing the slaves. They're messing up the money. And so if y'all think about just like now today, when white folks have a problem, they create a law for something. When there's something that adversely affects Black people and other people of color, someone develops a program. They're different, but that has a long history. And so the law was, what they did was they switched from a patrilineal law to matrilineal in 1662 with Act 12, which essentially stated that children born in the colony, free or bond, would take the status of the mother. And so what that means is they legally codified raping enslaved African women. It was made legal by a law. And, you know, laws are made and they're enforced. And so what that did is that prevented, that gave the slave masters' wives no incentive to kill the children anymore, because they didn't have to worry about sharing the inheritance. And they were operating within the confines of the law, which means they were good and lawful all at the same time. Wow.
And can I add to what you're saying, please?
Please.
If I can add to what you're saying in terms of, someone said just a short while ago about the light-skinned or the mulatto children were indications of the husband's infidelity. And it was that, but it was also on a more psychological level. It was not only proof of the infidelity, but it was also literally incensing the white female, because in her mind, psychologically speaking, the black female literally became competition for her, because it meant that the white male now had not only free access to the black female, but he was desiring of the black female, along with him making the white female his wife and mistress of the plantation. So this double whammy was placed upon the black female, not only because she was enslaved, she could be raped at will, taken at will, but now she's being viewed as the enemy from the white female, because the white female didn't have to compete with her, because the white female was mistress of the plantation, but she had to share that white male who had access to every black female enslaved on that plantation. So psychologically speaking, it brought up a whole nother issue altogether, even besides the producing of those mulatto children, which were physical, visible proof of what he was doing.
Right. And thank you for that, Mama. And as you were saying, you know, the mulatto children, what does mulatto mean? Does anyone?
You mix. You half white, half black.
No. Mulatto means mule. It means mule.
Mm-hmm.
Mule, M-U-L-E, mulatto.
Yes, it's a variation of that word. It's a variation of that word, yes.
And
yes.
a mule is manufactured, right?
Yes.
A mule is a mule is a GMO.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Just wanted to point that out too, because I know sometimes we celebrate and lift up mulatto. It's a mule. You know, they really did a number on us deliberately. And so,
yeah.
You know, and I know in the interest of time, and as we're running through that, I wanted to just, I guess this is probably a good place to see if folks have questions or something they'd like to add, because there is, again, there are 10 chapters in this book. And just to rattle off the titles, the chapters, it's religion, athletics, politics, entertainment, the good man syndrome, the resolving chapter, ownership rights, the voice, resentment, and black women leadership. That's the entirety of the book. And it's a 146-page book, by the way. And it sounds like it's not a very long book, but what folks tell me is that they look at it is that it's going to be a quick read, and they realize that it's anything but. It never comes. The quick read never comes. It is very, very dense, and it's not written in a way that just regular black folks are not able to access the information. So it's not an academic book. And that was intended not to be an academic book, because all of our people need to be able to connect with this information. You know, when we're talking about rape and rape culture, a lot of things are, you know, people think about the actual sexual violence, and that we were just talking about with regard to Act 12. What this book does, this book informs you what happens before that. See, it gives the analysis before we think it's okay to violate a black woman or a black girl. Something we've already had a certain kind of experience in our psyche about who she is. Before we even do that, that's what makes it possible. That's the part of it that we don't look at. That's how when we tell people, stop raping, don't rape, rape is bad. They're like, huh? Because it isn't just a matter of selecting to do this. This is about power and control, but this is about power and control of someone who we have all been socialized and conditioned to accept should always be under control. A black woman should always be under control. There's nobody checked faster. There's nobody censored faster or censored more publicly than a black woman. No one in the history of black in America, nobody. And because we understand she's supposed to stay in her place. Now, she didn't define this place. And in order for her to be in her place, someone must put her there. So many times we feel obligated as part of just keeping order to keep her in her place. The last chapter I'll just touch on is the resentment chapter. And there's another one too I would love to get into about the voice. I'd love to do all of them, but we just really don't have that kind of time. But, you know, there's something about, and I'll say this before I get to the resentment chapter, in the voice chapter, you know, there's something about, we don't really like hearing a black woman's voice because she complains too much. She always wants something. She money home. We got a problem with every time she opened her mouth. And I think we should look at where that comes from. The only thing really we want her to say is yes. That's pretty much it. And anything else that she may have to say, we ain't really trying to hear that. You know, very quickly, I'll give you, and throughout the course of the book too, I'm very much so in it, meaning I offer a very close look at my own growth and development from a very little boy throughout the course of my life, and how these things are things that I've internalized, that I had done and acted out and worked to undo every single day, because it's in here, and therefore it's in here. You know, I always call it, you know, you really haven't been battle tested until you've been to war with the white man in your mind and what he's told you about your people. You know, I mean, so many times we're in our white mind and we look at our people through the lens of white people. And not because we're bad people, but this has just been our conditioning, you know. And so the voice, in the voice chapter, here we go. Though seemingly logical, emotionally, there was really hard. This was really hard to do, and not necessarily because what she asked of me was so unreasonable. I don't think we really liked each other. I'm talking about my mother. I don't think we really liked each other at that point. Though I felt justified in it, I can recall not generally liking her all that much. She didn't embrace me the way my grandmother did. Most of what she said to me was about something I should be doing, but apparently was not, or at least not exactly as I should be. Again, this kind of tension between an older black woman and her young and only son is likely not so unique. However, I didn't approve of the way she did things either. And though I did not have parenting in my limited vocabulary early on, it was her style or lack thereof that didn't fit well with my spirit. Where was my daddy anyway? Why did she run him off? These were big questions that never really got answered truthfully. When I did get a response, it was suggested he was the neglectful one. I didn't want to hear it, and I didn't want to hear her, really. And as often as I could, I escaped earshot. I also really tried to do right just so she would not have anything to say to me. However, I simply could not do that much right often enough. Looking back, I frankly didn't like the sound of her voice, because what I remember most is negativity coming out of it. As a matter of fact, most of the chastising I received from early childhood, in school, at church, and elsewhere in the neighborhood came about almost exclusively from black women, or some little black girl telling me something that I didn't particularly like in response to something I had said or did to her, of course. So as I've discovered through the course of my own life and with work of other Black men and boys, my childhood, adolescent, and even adult experiences with engaging Black women and girls are not at all so unique. It is just folks do not usually discuss these kinds of things generally in a truthful manner, publicly or in so-called mixed company. I've heard so many things about what Black women and girls generally say or do over the course of my life, and I'm sure you have heard some familiar things yourself. In fact, some of my earliest memories are those of older Black men talking about how troublesome and meddlesome Black women are, how they like to be in your business, and that they are nosy. I heard Black women especially like to keep up mess and drama. I was told directly that I could not turn a hoe into a housewife and should never try, that some women were just unfit. They told me all Black women were money hungry and scandalous. I got some good advice once to never buy something you needed a woman to help you pay for because she would always hold it over your head. The white man told me that across the board, it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission. As a teenager, I heard that no really means yes. When I learned that I was supposed to tell girls everything but the truth, I was in single digits. They said, don't love them hoes. Women should be seen and not heard was popular too. Standard advice was to watch them hoes because they are watching your pockets. I was told to never buy a bitch shit. And if I did, it was only to get something in return. They said to don't be no trick. I was taught to keep my woman separate from my other women. Have you heard these things about Black women? Did you know that they plot and scheme to get money from Black men? If a Black woman cheats on you, you are done with her because she is no good. One thing for sure is that Black women are never to be trusted because all they do is lie. Now, again, there's a lot more, and this is from the Voice chapter, but it lays out, again, the historical narrative that's repeated, that's, again, internalized really by all of us. And then we pathologize the experience of Black women who are responding to this particular unique oppression inside of our collective oppression here in America. And so as I'm looking at the time and I'm going to say, do we have any questions or anything that folk want to say from the chat or anything about anything that we've covered so far?
I know we had a few people with their hands up, so I did kind of want to try to go in order of whose hand I saw up. So I believe earlier, Brother Teresa's hand is up. Teresa, did you still have a question? Oh, I think he might have walked away.
And just for everybody, as our sister segment is looking at that, I can't see any hands or anything, so I don't know any of how that's working. So I didn't. Just so you know, I didn't ignore anyone I didn't see.
Okay.
So please go ahead, proceed.
Brother Teresa, did you still have a question?
Thank you, sister. No, actually, before I raised my hand, just to try to alert the group that Sister Shalea wasn't able to hear the call, but that was it.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And sister, I'm not remembering your name, but with the name Our Community, did you still have a question?
Oh, yes. It wasn't so much of a question, but in listening to all of this, I take care of victims of sexual assault, and I've done this well over 20 years. The hardest conviction is when it is a Black woman who is sexually assaulted. That's what I know professionally. On top of that, the other piece is if the Black woman is in a relationship and she's a victim of sexual assault, we also have to ensure that there's no domestic violence or interpersonal violence, because the first thing that comes out is, you know, you were cheating on me, or, you know, you have a relationship that you were trying to keep quiet, or, you know, somehow you deserved it. And it's very interesting because I've taken care of people from different ethnicities, different cultures, and I hear that she gets reduced from being a woman to a female. That is one of the worst terms that I can, it's very derogatory. And we know in domestic violence, that in order to beat someone, just like in sexual assault, to rape someone, you must turn them into an object first. They can't be a human, because you can't do that to a human. So you objectify, and that's where she becomes a female, a thing, an it. So you can do all of that to them and walk away with a clear conscience just about. And that's
right.
just, it's very interesting to understand the intricacies, of it. I've been in the field off and on for 30 years, directly 20. And it's just, I love the work I do. And when you look at the mindset of the offender and then working with the victims who have been sexually assaulted, I also work with those who were sexually assaulted as children, which is sexual abuse. That's something different. And how they felt, as children. The majority of my victims of sexual abuse are young Black women. Mm. Interestingly enough, here on Facebook, I've friended quite a few women. Approximately 80% of the women I know have been sexually assaulted in some way, shape, or form. Absolutely. From childhood to adulthood. And it's insane. I mean, then you see the female this and gold digger that, and there's really no respect for that Black woman. And so me being a Black woman, I do understand it. As a victim myself, I truly understand it. So I'm glad that this is brought up. I mean, I'm going to keep doing what I do. I mean, I even talk to women here on Facebook. They call me. They know I'm available 24/7. But just, I can professionally say, and I've worked in different states, that yes, this book is on point because that is the professional experiences that I have seen through the various cultures that I've taken care of. And a conviction for a Black woman, even when they come into my office, first thing they say, I know nothing's going to come of it. I know they're not going to do anything about it. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, I do as much as I possibly can for them, but in essence, they're right because we don't matter. Not in the eyes of the law anyway. We're just females.
That's right.
And on that, I yield.
That's right.
This
Thank
is
All right.
If I can pause for a moment before we go to any more questions, this is really heavy. This is really heavy, and I know some sister in the chat commented that, and I'm feeling that myself. This is a lot to take in, especially as a Black woman. So when we get done with this conversation, if anyone just wants to process or to kind of just talk about how you're feeling, we will set some time afterwards to do that because this is a hard discussion. So I believe Baba Khalil had a question, and then I have also one from the chat if we have time.
Again, I don't have a question. I actually champion his presentation in his book. I am a recovering abuser. I'll use that term. So I have experience in understanding a little bit that I'm also a social scientist, and I have studied the sociological interactions between us, between the women, between European. I know as a kid, and even today, that the conversation has always looked at women from the Black man the way that the slave master looks at women, the Black woman. I know that, I mean, it's simple because we learned what being a man is from the slave master. That was our idea of manhood. So we knew nothing else when we wanted to be a man, when we got any kind of so-called independence, when we got any kind of liberty. Our idea of acting like a man was acting like a white guy.
That's right.
That, and you can't get around that.
Not at all.
I grew up, and all of the things that you said, I remember all of those conversations. I remember participating in those conversations. While you was sharing, I grabbed a couple of books of some of our social organizations, some of our Black social organizations, and how they refer to the woman. Even though they attempted to elevate her, it's exactly what you said. In order, they elevated her from a position of ownership, from a position of I'm just from one of the texts, and this is from the message to the Black man. This is from the message to the Black man. Now, there's a whole page that talks about protect and elevate your woman. Beautiful. But on the page before, it talks about the Black woman. And the first thing it says is, the woman is man's field to produce his nation. If he does not keep the enemy out of his field, he won't produce a good nation. Now, I don't know. For me, when I read that, I'm reading that here it is, I own this particular property right here, and in order for me to be able to produce it, I need to make sure that I take care of it because it's my property. And that's in every social organization that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of a number of them, that was always the position. That was always the position. And we were taught that as though that was right. You know, there's another piece, but I want to give everybody else a chance to even share, because it's. I'm glad. This is a real. I'm gonna have to get that book. It's an excellent topic. Like I said, I'm a healer, and I have always championed women. I've always done that. I was probably one of the few men in the days when the AIDS virus was first prevalent. I was one of the few men that they allowed in their support groups, because today I don't think like that.
I know. Thank you, Bob.
I'll pin right there. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one comment from the chat, one question from the chat. If we have questions, if we have time, sorry. And if you need to save this kind of towards the end, that's fine as well. But it was asked, what are some recommendations for breaking the cycle of competition and transaction within Black families / marriages / relationships?
That's an excellent question. And I have there's a chapter on that. The athletics chapter really lays it out. And so I want to say that I understand even our logical train of emotions and thought in the book. And of course, I did not go in the order of the book this evening because that wasn't the spirit of this discussion. But the book really builds a progressive analysis that takes you through all of that. And it isn't something we can sidestep or piecemeal. And I'm also saying that is because one of the things we have learned through our indoctrination in the imposition of white organizational culture is that we want solutions. Because don't you hear that in your, solutions? This is all about the solution. Why are you talking about it? We need to talk about solutions. But the reality is we don't yet know enough about the problem to be able to cultivate a collective solution. We don't know enough about it, meaning all of the different places and ways that it shows up for us. And it's particularly challenging because we've internalized these things. We've been internalized these particular beliefs. And I'll say more about that if I could, Sister Segmet, just because I know money in relationships with Black women is always a bone of contention. Money is always a bone of contention, whether we're, and I'll dig into it. But there's one chapter in the voice chapter that I wanted to offer to add to this discussion, because our sister previously who has worked with the survivors of sexual trauma as a career and does that particular work, she hit on some of those statistics, and I would really be surprised if there wasn't a sister that was on this call that hadn't been violated. I would be surprised if there wasn't a sister on this call that had not been violated, based on my experience, because the data around that, as she pointed out, the sisters don't report that because they know ain't nobody gonna do nothing. They know that. And as a matter of fact, they're gonna re-stimulate the trauma because they're gonna really interrogate her about what she had on. Why was she even over there at 2 o'clock in the morning? What did she think was gonna happen to her? Like, that is going to be the line of, so she's gonna really be interrogated because it's so uncomfortable for us to say we're complicit in her oppression. So we really do use the imposition of her internalized inferiority that we know has the momentum of 400 years to say this is somehow your fault. And we burden her with it so that she don't even say. So the statistics don't give us everything. But there are some statistics that are good and are accurate about Black women that I also want to share. Okay, and so on page 124, if you've got the book, it's on 124, page 124, and this is also in the voice chapter. I recently, before the questions, read a little bit from that chapter. But this paragraph is significant, so I want you to listen carefully. There are other things about Black women and girls that are much more factual, statistically accurate, and widely accessible that we don't hear so much about from each other. These are things which could certainly prove useful in focusing our cultural lens on the uniqueness of today's typical Black woman and girl experience. Black women have always worked since the plantation and when other groups of women did not as much, and today comprise more than 53% of the Black labor force. Look at that wording too, Black labor force. That's important too, in America. According to the Bureau, and this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now here's what's also important. In 1880, just 15 years after forced free labor, 35% of married Black women and 73% of single Black women were in the labor force. And compared with only 7% of married white women and 24% of single white women. And although Black women have the longest history of sustained employment compared with other women, in 2017, the median annual earnings for full-time, year-round Black women workers was just over $36,000 gross annual income, an amount 21% lower than white women. This is according to the Economic Policy Institute. Black families are more reliant on Black women's incomes than other families, since 80% of Black mothers are breadwinners in their family. 80%. Comparatively, the data also collects the median wealth of white women in America, the median wealth now, white women in America, at $40,000, okay? The median wealth for white women in America at $40,000. For Black women, the median wealth is only $100. $100. And we say, she money hungry. Well, yes, Black women are starving. And that's the end of that particular paragraph right there on some statistical data associated specifically with around Black women and the Black woman's historical and current experience in America. That's in the voice chapter on page 124. Now that's just a paragraph. There's a lot more in terms of context before and after that lays that out. But I really think we should consider that the median wealth for Black women in 2020 is $100. And I'm saying that, and I'm very careful about how I'm saying that, because this doesn't mean what someone is worth. The whole idea of you being worth something is rooted in the ideology of chattel slavery. Your value is connected
Say that again.
to the whole ideology of value is directly connected to chattel slavery, meaning as a Black person, your measurement is in relation to how much money white folks can make from your experience.
Absolutely.
That is your function. That is your primary and chief function in this oppressive society as Black people. So, and to show you how that is even pathologized in the way we acted out, we are telling our sister, girl, you gotta know your worth. Dig that. Girl, you gotta know your worth. So $100, and the reason I'm saying $100 is because what kind of a position does that put a Black woman in to take abuse? Because she can't make it with $100. So she's gonna stay with her owner. She's looking for somebody to own her because she can't make it by herself off $100. Now, she's been in the workforce longer than any. Nobody to this day, there is nobody busier than a Black woman. I'm just telling you what I know. I have seen it. There is no one busier than a Black woman. There are Black women who have done all kinds of things just today. And they're probably on this call doing other things, tending to other people. I'm sure of it. And it's what they do every single day. They are taught to do this every single day. If they are complained about it, they are weak. You understand? They're weak. They need to be strong Black women without any analysis on what's acting on you to require you to have this level of strength. See how we invisibilize the abuser, but we focus on how the abused is responding to their oppression. And then we make that the center of the conversation. And because we're talking about Black women, everybody know, well, they ain't nothing no way. So of course, they're a problem. And when they try to bring it to our attention, there she go complaining again. Every time I turn, I don't want to hear that because you always got a problem with something. So this is normative experience for the women who are politically designated as Black. So I'm saying this to say that as the book talks about rape culture, and a culture is a way of life. So this is the way that we live. I'm talking about the normative experiences through the lens of religion, athletics, politics, and entertainment. And so in so much as you know, those men and boys who are politically designated as Black, to answer our sister's question from the early on healing in this environment, we have been co-opted to compound that oppression as Black men, because as Ababa Khalil said, our measure of manhood is the white boy that oppresses all of us. Then he offers us as Black men a very limited, partial, and provisional membership into his patriarchal fraternity, so long as we maintain that arrangement. So what is clearer to me is that we have been conditioned to think that the Black man is the absolute antithesis and arch enemy of the proverbial white man. But I suggest to you that that's not really true. I think the arch nemesis or the antithesis of the white man is in fact the Black woman. Because if it were not, everyone wouldn't need to keep her in this same condition. It wouldn't be required. But she's proven time and time again that she, in fact, is the strongest. She is the strongest. All of the busy sisters who are on the call now, who are going to get off the call and go take care of people because people are waiting on them and have come from doing all these things, that's been Black women who do that. And we watch them and marvel at how they do that. And this is who they are, and this is what they do. in spite of what has occurred historically. You see what I'm saying? So if we're gonna talk about how do we do something, as the sister was asking, I would say what we need to do is we need to listen to Black women. That's the first thing we need to do. And the reason we need to listen to Black women is because nobody is more qualified to tell us how do you survive in a very difficult, hostile situation, because they keep on having children, they keep on having us, they keep on dealing with us. So who else is really more qualified to lead us through this kind of radical and revolutionary healing but a Black woman? And I would suggest that the book makes that particular case in great detail, and it really challenges us. There's many things that we, again, time won't allow us to get into it. This wasn't a formal reading or a lecture. And I appreciate your patience and willingness to listen and watch and engage. And I would just say, if you'd like to go further, the book is available. There's also a private Facebook group of only readers of the book. So as they're talking about this with a common language and common analysis, there's an understanding of what they're talking about when they're talking about rape culture. And all of the kinds of things that may come to mind that we didn't get into it on the call or in the book. We deal with feminism, we deal with white women feminism, we deal with all of that stuff. We deal with the whole pronoun thing. We deal with all of that stuff. All this is in the book. All of this is part of the culture and the way of life. The good man syndrome is a very in-depth chapter as well. The athletics chapter, there's a lot in there. And a lot that, again, it's 146 pages, but the thought is that, I'm going to just read this and have this intellectual exercise. But this book is designed to be a companion for you on your healing journey. The kind of companion that at first you glance at as though it's some kind of a resource, but then that glance becomes a much deeper, longer one. And then you realize that you're looking at yourself. And you're looking at how you are perhaps complicit in maintaining the particular oppression through the lenses of religion, athletics, politics, and entertainment, because this is part of your way of being, your socialization, your paradigm, your rightness. And, as it's cloaked in religion, we sure want to be right. We try to do what's right. And so that corrupts our righteousness, but only Black women pay the heaviest cost for that. So this requires us to be courageous enough to really do some real deep introspection and to know that there's nothing wrong with us, but something happened to all of us. And the resolving, the word resolving, it's got two definitions. The resolving is when you take something and you break it down into its parts, you're resolving it, but you have to look at the parts and how those parts create the entire culture. And then the other definition for resolving is when you come to a definite determination about what you're going to do. And what I'm saying is that there can be no definite determination made without the direction of Black women and girls, because they have been most impacted by this. As a Black man, as a good Black man and well-intended Black man, I am in no position to say to Black women what the right thing is for this. My obligation as a Black man who is a lover of Black people, who has an allegiance to Black people, is to do what brothers tell me is the most scariest thing. And I know Baba Khalil, he's been on the planet for a little while too. Do you know what the brothers tell me is one of the scariest questions? And sisters, this perhaps is a question that you may be unacquainted with, and so that's not your fault. But the question when you ask a Black woman, what do you need? What can I do for you? How can I help? And then for you to actually do it. For most brothers, that sends the heart in serious palpitation, because we already know we may or may not be equipped to do it. So what do? We don't ask, so that we don't have to be reminded and feel uncomfortable. And so the being able to confront that and get over that is a portal to the healing that allows us to listen and accept the leadership of Black women who are most effective, who demonstrated to us, this is how you love. This is how you love through all of that. So whatever we're trying to do as Black men that we think is so very difficult, all we need to do is observe, not ask, but observe a Black woman and watch how she's doing all of the thousands of things she's doing, and how everybody's still telling her she ain't nothing, and how she still got $100 to her name, and she get up every single day and do it. Ain't nothing we're trying to do harder than that. So thank you, family. I appreciate it.
Well, that's wonderful. You know, wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wow. Thank you for that powerful discussion.
Yes.
Like I said, this is a hard one. This is a deep discussion. My ladies, again, if you want to stay after to process, please do. But this has, I think, awakened a lot in me from starting to read the book and from hearing what you presented so far. And I think it's something that is really a catalyst for change in our community that we desperately need. So I thank you so much for doing this important work and taking that on. And not only, teaching others, but also doing the work and being the example as well. That's so important. So we're going to end with some words of wisdom from Baba Khalil. But did anybody have any quick questions before we did that?
I did want to say something, something that was said about one of the books that were brought up about not, protecting your land from the enemy. How do you do that? It is really within your character. Like, are you a kind person? Are you a humble person? I mean, those types of things take you a long way. Really, because I know being humble, people seem to favor me, when I'm a humble person. And speaking on you saying about how to keep our Black women healthy and things like that. Well, for me, when I see a Black woman coming, if it's a door anywhere where a Black woman is coming, I don't gotta know her. I'm opening up that door. I open up doors for Black women anytime I see them. So I mean, I try to do that, because I think that helps, the resolution, resolving the situation.
Okay. Well, right on, brother. And thank you for that and your behavior and your demeanor and your good intent. To go back to your question about the way you opened it up, and I know it was alluding to something Baba Khalil said about protecting the Black woman from the enemy, right?
Yes.
So the work in our charge with protecting the Black woman from the enemy, we have to interrogate, are we the enemy? We have to interrogate, are we the enemy? And how do we protect her from us? Because us having good intentions doesn't necessarily equal good output for the benefit of Black women. That's the whole thing. And so that's why it's challenging work for us, because we hold up, I don't mean to add to your oppression. I'm being nice to you. And we think they should be grateful for that, because don't we know that they should know that we ain't got to do that? After all, they just females. So it's something where we have to be clear about who the enemy is and where the enemy is. And that's challenging, because we have to look at us. The work really is not what to do to them or for them, but to look at us. And that's not something we've ever had to do, because our limited partial and provisional membership in the white man's patriarchy gives us the positional authority to put the onus of our problems on the Black woman and say, well, this is just because of her, and that's what it is. So for us to be able to walk with her, we have to really listen to her and do what she tells us to do. And that's challenging too. The reason that's challenging is because we've been conditioned to say she's supposed to obey us. She's supposed to obey us. And so if we obey her, now we have been effeminized. So it's not masculine to listen to what Black women want. So see, then there's that internal struggle that ain't got nothing to do with her. But those are the kinds of things that prevent us from actually being able to protect her from the external enemy and unwittingly inflict additional pain and trauma on her from the enemy within. You know, so what you can do is that you can make sure that when Black woman sees you, she knows she's safe. That's what you can do. You can make sure she knows that she's safe. And
Right.
she'll instruct best on how to do that. But that is something that we can do right now. How many sisters on the call are scared to death of Black men because of experiences they've had with Black men? And then we get offended because we paying for what somebody else did to her, and we still don't really care about what happened to her. We just don't like the fact that it's inconvenienced us because I'm a good man. That's why I have that chapter called the Good Man Syndrome. It kind of lays all that out and clarifies the difference between intent and outcome and the things that prevent us from being as effective as we'd like to be. So you're right, and I hope that answered the question.
Yes. Yes. Please.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for clarifying that. And the book can be found at truelovemovement.com. I put the link in the chat in addition to the Facebook group. Brother Shaq, did you want to provide any more information on how they can get the book or how they can be connected to you?
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for that. You've given the link. I would, of course, I'm on Facebook as Brother Shaq or Bro Shaq. To like True Love Movement on Facebook, and then there's the True Love Movement and Resolving Rape Culture on Instagram. Now, if you are a friend with me on Facebook, there are what's called mini Rona readings, where during the quarantine, I did some mini readings from the religion chapter, the athletics chapter, you know, I read the whole resentment chapter. And just things I've touched on here, but it's a little bit longer and more comprehensive, as I know that today's discussion kind of flowed in a way that perhaps wasn't, this was a little bit maybe disjointed because it didn't follow the progression of the book or even necessarily the progression of thought, but it was totally consistent with the circular nature of our African minds. And so the many Rona readings help, as well as there's some excerpts. There's some actual excerpts from the books that are on the page that, again, folk can look at if they just want to get a little more context about what it's about, and if they want a dialogue or they want to, you know, do some work around it. Because we're organizing. This is what we're doing. We're organizing. This is part of the organizing. The healing work is organizing. And so this is just a contribution to our collective organizing.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Right on.
Yeah.
Hotep. Bob Khalil, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, dokie. You know, I had passage I want to read, but it's been really, really heavy, and I don't want to lay any more. But one of the things I want to say from a personal perspective, and I guess this is probably a confession. I've heard a lot of sisters talk about not feeling protected by Black men, and I don't feel at this point that I can protect them, and that fucks me up. That fucks me up. Because I'm in this, I mean, I know how to use a gun. I know how to fight. I ain't talking about that. I mean, I have 4 daughters, right? And granddaughters and friends. But when it comes to this system and what this system has done, I don't feel like I can. And that messes me. I want to say that I apologize for any any indication of non-respect and love that I may have demonstrated in any way. And I want to start there, and I don't want to, I think that right there is how I want to end this, is from the perspective of where I'm at. And Brother Shaq, I really appreciate this. This presentation actually moved me to do my work, and I'm a healer, and I don't have a life practice of dealing directly with women, but that's what I deal with probably more than anything else. So I'm always in that position, and I'm honored by your presentation, and I thank you again. And I'm here if anytime I could help and support anybody.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you. So at this time, I'm gonna stop recording. If anyone